Everyone is vulnerable, no matter how much we try to avoid it. We are born vulnerable, and we stay that way most of our childhood. Our relationship with vulnerability is something we are acquainted with, yet we tend to abandon it as we merge into adulthood. What would you associate with the term vulnerability? Is it weakness, fear, hurt, betrayal? Have any of you heard of Brene Brown? Yes? Yes, no? Yeah, okay. Her name has become synonymous with the word vulnerability, and her TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, was one of the top 5 most viewed in the world. And she defines vulnerability as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. Doesn't sound very good, does it? So let me get a thumbs up. How many of you aspire to be vulnerable? And how many of you, thumbs up, yes, you want to be vulnerable? Thumbs down, doesn't sound like a good idea. All right, okay. So we have a mixture of both here, right? But Brene Brown goes on and suggests that vulnerability is our most accurate measure of courage. And to be vulnerable is to allow ourselves to be seen. Vulnerability is typically thought of as the center of emotions such as grief or shame or fear or disappointment, but it is also the center of emotions, the center of and the birthplace of love, belonging, authenticity, creativity, courage, and accountability. It's nearly impossible to find a story that relates to courage that is not underpinned by a story about vulnerability. The paradox with vulnerability is that we often see vulnerability as courage in another person and weakness in ourselves. Interesting. When we meet people, we actually look for vulnerability. That's the place where we connect. We see it as courage in others, but when we consider ourselves being vulnerable, we often might perceive it as weakness. I'm sure we've all had stories in our lives of our own experiences of vulnerability, but I'd like to share one with you of my life. And it had a very big impact on me. So when I went into seminary, one of the things we did was we shared, of course, within the group, personal experiences and our feedback about spirituality. And speaking about spirituality is often a very intimate thing for most of us. It could put ourselves in a situation to be critiqued or debated with. But anyway, that was the situation. They would pass a microphone around the room. And when that microphone would come to me, I would pass it to the person next to me. I would avoid speaking into it. I mean, I actively avoided speaking into it. I would get anxiety if the microphone was in front of me. I wanted nothing to do with public speaking. All our classes were recorded because we had distance students as well, all over the world. And they would get a CD in the mail, because this was 10 years ago, and they would listen to the class, do their homework, and learn that way. That was the way they attended. This was way before Zoom. Right? So this is what I did the whole year. The mic would come to me, and off it would go to the next person. At the end of the year, we had a retreat where the students from all over the world would come to this one location, and we'd all meet each other, but most of them didn't know me because I didn't say anything. So cycle ahead to the next year, second year of seminary. The head of our school, her name is Diane Burke, she was the spiritual director, walks over to me before the class starts. And we have the most attended class of the year. And she says, Sonia, I would like you, after the music stops, to just come over and take the mic from me and lead the school in a prayer spontaneously. So I looked at her, terrified, and I said, well, thank you very much, but yeah, I can't do that. Maybe I could do it next month or another time once I write it and practice it. And she said, you could do it. And she walks away. And I'm losing my breath. I try to chase her to get her to change her mind and retract this thing that she had just committed me to have to do. There was no way I could pin her down. So I had no choice. And I took the mic. And I went up front and I let whatever was in me come through. And then I gave her back the mic and I exhaled and I sat down. And she started to talk to the class. And she said, class, I just want you to know that I struck absolute terror in the heart of Sonia this morning when I approached her just a few minutes ago to ask her to share a spontaneous prayer with all of you. And her response when I asked her this is she said, I can't do that. And she said, so I ask you all, can she do that? I just want to let you know that we never clapped. We didn't applaud in seminary. We would just rub our hands together so no one would get more accolades than anyone else. So we would be kind that way. So when she asked the class, can she do that? They went nuts. They were cheering, they were clapping, whistling. They really, the excitement that they had was just really very affirming. And Diane saw something in me that I didn't. And when she assigned me that task, she forced me past my fear into my vulnerability. And then as I moved into ministry, when I'm asked to do something, I say always yes, at least once, even if I didn't want to do it. I felt that, perhaps there is something I can offer. And I could promise you all that public speaking was not something I sought out to do. And quite honestly, I do it in spite of the discomfort and the vulnerability I feel every time I come here in front of you. My hope and my work as a minister is to lessen the suffering of human beings, of others. And somehow I just hope that when I share a part of myself with you, that maybe, just maybe, it can be a way of doing that with others. One of the things I found out as I was studying vulnerability is that there are two different signs. Does anybody here know sign language? No, American Sign Language. There are two different ways of signing the word vulnerable or vulnerability. One is a flat palm out, a fist with a one finger down that bends like this. And it means weak in the knees. And the other sign for vulnerability is this. Both fists go to your chest and they're pulled out with courage and with strength. They both mean vulnerability. As children, we saw courage in Disney movies. And we looked up to adults when they acted strong and brave. We were often rewarded when we acted bravely ourselves. Boys were often told they shouldn't cry, and girls were often suggested that we should be pretty and pleasant. I don't know if that was all of our experience, but that was a common denominator in the time that many of us grew up. More or less, we received the message to mask our true selves. that for being truly seen will lead to rejection. And clearly there's a problem there, because how can we be courageous without being vulnerable? Brene Brown says we can't. She says that true courage comes when we decide to take a risk without knowing the outcome. It means showing up and letting yourself be seen despite the risk. When you show up in this way, you open yourself up to joy and connection. And you can only do it by accepting that there could possibly be pain. And she closes a talk with this following statement. She says, here's the thing. And she says, I'm not going to lie to you. She uses another word, but I'm going to be a little more PC. Vulnerability is hard and it's scary and it feels dangerous, but it's not as hard and scary or dangerous as getting to the end of our lives and having to ask ourselves, what if I would have shown up? What if I would have said, I love you? What if I had? I read a book a bunch of years ago called Life Lessons by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler, which I thought was excellent. And it was a collection of stories of people that they shared that were narratives of joy and regret at the end of people's lives. And the most common regret at the end of life is not having lived their life as authentically as they wished they could have. People didn't regret the things they did. They regretted the things they didn't do. And another thought that supported this is, I know many of you have heard me talk about Romemu and Rabbi David Ingber, who is the amazing rabbi of this synagogue in New York. And I'm hoping to take us all on a field trip there one day when we're able to go out and about. I just love this community. And I love his services, and I listen to Shabbat services online. And one of the services I heard him share about his belief in what the path to enlightenment or spiritual growth truly is. And he shared that it is not becoming who you think you should be. It is becoming and revealing and embodying who you actually are. Interesting. Well, you know, I used to be more of a people pleaser. And if any of you have any friends in 12-step or have had any 12-step experience, you're probably familiar with that slogan. But somehow over the last decade of my life, I'm not that anymore. I do my best to navigate promoting harmony and oneness while still authentically speaking my truth, which is not always a very comfortable thing. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. Being human is very, very difficult. In the words of author Rita Mae Brown, and Arlene, I'm pretty sure you know who she is. The reward for conformity was that everybody liked you except for yourself. Not everyone will like you, and not everyone's opinion really matters. Who matters the most is you. The person who needs to like you the most is yourself. You are the one you live with. We all have a spectrum of qualities within us that range from shame to love to courage. And there are times where we retract in fear, and there are times where we are heroic. And I sometimes think the spiritual path is to try to live our life more awakened to who we really are. I think that's the real invitation. You know, I was raised Eastern Orthodox Christian. I'm Armenian. And I remember a teaching from Matthew 14 that always struck me. And it's where Jesus states, "You are the light of the world." And he says this as a directive. He doesn't say it as a suggestion, like maybe you're the light of the world. You might be the light of the world. No, he says, you are the light of the world. And he goes on to say, you are not to hide that light by any means, because it can only be shared when it is exposed. This teaching supports the importance of vulnerability and ultimately authenticity. All right, so in closing, I think it would be appropriate for me to take a moment and be vulnerable, very vulnerable with all of you. And I'd like to do that by sharing my personal spiritual beliefs. And for me, this is intimate. So I believe that there is a consciousness that is completely benevolent, that I see as a divine thread that ties us all together. And I believe it weaves around us and through us and in us. I believe it's our essence. I believe this divine consciousness is in everyone and in everything. I believe that if there was a word in the English language for what this consciousness is, it would be love. And I believe we as human beings are drawn to it like all plants and trees are drawn to the sun. I think we yearn for a connection to each other, to know that divine consciousness. And I think it is through our relationship with one another that we know it. We also can feel it when we are in the trees, in the woods, at least I do. In nature, when we have moments of awe, I could feel palpably that astounding connection that there are no words for. I also see it in people, and I know it for myself by being present to all of you on a Sunday, or any time we come together with this intention of oneness for ourselves and for the world. So as we close, I'd like to invite you to consider seeing that loving source within yourselves and within each other. And may you expose your beautiful essence to one another. May you do it courageously. For what we are searching for outside us may really be inside us and in between us. The world is waiting for you. You are the greatest gift you can give. May you share yourself freely and abundantly. May it be so.
If you like this video, please like us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video. Thank you.